the obvious conclusion from this past weekend is that even if a Grand Prix is relatively non-eventful in the grand scheme of things, Formula One itself will always find a way to bring the drama and the discourse, even if the TV direction fails to show half of the good bits. Let's unpack that. Kia ora, I'm Kimmy, I talk F1 in the world's second worst accent, and these are my 3 conclusions from the 2025 Singapore Grand Prix. Without context, the fact that McLaren celebrated their constructors' title on the podium without their driver, who's currently leading the championship, is, well, it's not a great look. Cue Oscar Piastri's reaction from the media pen taking about 14 seconds to start going viral, and a whole bunch of F1 fans getting pretty mad on his behalf, which, honestly, kind of fair. Even when you consider that the reason Oscar wasn't involved in that particular part of the post-race festivities was thanks to F1's procedural rules and his obligation to go directly to the media pen following his P4 finish and weigh-in. I mean, that seems pretty reasonable, right? That's the rules. And in the moment, sure, maybe, but you have to ask the question. Surely Formula One management could have given the team a few minutes to get Oscar out of the media pen, make a minor exception, and give McLaren the opportunity to include him in the glory shots before sending him back to face the music. Heck, even McLaren themselves surely could have gone, you know what, let's let them fine us and we'll take the better optics, thanks. And they could have mitigated this whole furore by doing that. Drag him out of the pen, get him in a huddle and down the paddock quick smart, and give him a bottle of champagne to spray around for a bit. And all of this is happening while people are losing their minds over the first lap incident where Lando Norris tagged the back end of Max Verstappen, subsequently drove into his teammate, and then just drove away in P3. Add that to it appearing like Oscar cut off Zach Brown in the middle of his congratulations when the reality is he'd already switched the car off and thus his radio when that particular message started coming through. And it's a whole lot of mess that in hindsight, I'm sure McLaren will take a good hard look at and go, how could we have not looked like a bunch of total tools in this scenario? Answer? Get on the radio earlier and be willing to accept a potential fine for a minor media duties infraction. So while, yeah, there was potential for McLaren to do things slightly differently in hindsight there, you can't help but feel like F1 giving McLaren a short window to do their championship spraying up the top when they knew one of their drivers was going through it down in the pen, was taking advantage of an already fraught situation and will help feed into the drama of this title fight for the rest of the season. Just like the broadcast directors can pick and choose what radio to play to fit the narrative F1 wants to spin for any particular race or driver or team, Formula One management has shown it can also leverage the rules around processes to make drama appear where perhaps it doesn't. As is always the case, discourse breeds hype, and you can't help but wonder if this is the true beginning of what I can only describe as the drive to survive-ification of Formula One's media narrative. And let's be real here, F1 fans do tend to love drama. I love drama, but not when it's manufactured, and this whole thing felt so contrived that it leaves a bad taste in more ways than one. Also, that McLaren social media post at the pit lane celebration with the respect caption, that just gave me the mega ick, not gonna lie. Somebody please put a person in charge of the passive-aggressive inference meter over there at McLaren. I am begging. Another thing that leaves a bad taste and kind of tangential to this first point is how the broadcast direction team seems to be really struggling to balance tense fights at the front with legitimate overtakes or other drama happening further down the field. Can you talk quieter, please? Thank you. Now, I know I might be in the minority here by saying that I found the Red Bull and the McLaren fighting through traffic in the latter stages of the race incredibly tense. I was on the edge of my seat and very much glued to what was happening on the screen. But every time my eyes flicked to the timing chart, I kept seeing Carlos Sainz or Fernando Alonso one place higher than before and wondering, where the heck was the picture-in-picture of those overtakes? And maybe the broadcast team just thought that watching guys on newer tyres overtaking someone on older ones wasn't that interesting. But considering the #1 complaint about Singapore most years is its lack of overtaking, the decision to show the 2 guys who were actually on the charge and it was happening late on in favour of extended coverage of cars being lapped, albeit under very tense circumstances, that was just a really interesting one. Not in a good way. Sure, a DRS pass isn't the most thrilling thing in the world, but Singapore is a race of strategy, and both the drivers who were making progress through the field had additional context behind their positions. Sainz with the qualifying disqualification that had him starting from 18th, and Alonso with his abysmal pit stop that deposited him further down the order than he would have liked and meant fighting through a couple of extra cars to get back to where he started. Part of what can make or break Singapore as a viewing experience is seeing the strategic choices pay off, and with Sainz in particular, we didn't get to see the spoils of that epic 50-lap stint on medium tyres that put him in a position for points. And once Alonso cleared Hadjar, a fight that we thankfully did get to see, that was pretty much the end of that, even though he passed Behrman, Sainz and Lawson all in the space of a few laps. Tyre offsets are what create overtakes in some races in this generation of F1 car, and that strategic intrigue is what keeps things interesting. You can't complain about people saying this was a boring race when you only showed two drivers holding station, essentially. And considering there's going to be 2 Spanish races next year, you'd think that they want to show the Spanish drivers when they're putting in solid performances. But I suppose those fresh tyres just aren't worth showing the benefit of. And yeah, being part of the broadcast team isn't easy, but the reality is this is how F1 is shared with the world, rather than just the very small percentage of people who are able to actually attend a race. There's definitely some learnings from this one. And that's not even mentioning Lewis Hamilton's alternative track layout he drove in the last few laps after his brakes decided to just give up. The biggest indication of how catastrophic that was, beyond the short replay of the sparks coming from his front left wheel, was the fact that you could see him dropping like a stone on the timing chart. Was it super thrilling to watch a guy cut a bunch of corners? Maybe not, but it's still an important storyline that was happening during the race that we basically didn't see beyond the initial failure. And I do really want to dig into that whole situation about Lewis's brakes in a bunch of other ways, but I need to do a day or so's research and dig up some really solid precedents before I can even think about opening that can of worms. Before I get into my final conclusion, a quick break to say thanks a bunch to my patrons and invite you to like this video and subscribe to my channel if you're enjoying it. Clicking buttons is fun, and it's free. If you'd like to become a patron, the link is here on screen as well as down in the description, along with paid options that get your name in the credits and access to my self-calculating championship spreadsheet. You can also subscribe for free to get email when I post new videos. Thanks to everyone who supports my channel in every way, from watching to the end right through to financially. You're all very much appreciated. Finally, and I think the most significant thing I took from this weekend, is that George Russell is fast becoming the favourite for the 2026 title. Now, granted, the chatter about the Mercedes engine being a force to be reckoned with next year has come under fire a little bit in recent weeks, and nobody's really going to know how it's all going to shake out until they drive out on track for the first test in January, or even later, considering reliability is always a big question mark at the start of a new regulation cycle. But with Russell performing consistently at an incredibly high level, and Mercedes' theoretical advantage at the beginning of the new reg cycle of being a factory team, if their public confidence translates into track performance and they finally come to an agreement with George's contract, which seems to be more about Toto wanting to keep his options open and George wanting to shut that down pretty damn quickly, then he's very much my early doors pick for the 2026 title. Before McLaren really started running away with things this year, he was my dark horse pick for this season too, and I still stand by that thought process. His consistency has been exceptional and only hampered by Mercedes' inconsistent car performance. And even as someone who's not the world's biggest George fan, I'm happy to admit this. Now, viewers with solid memories will remember though that back in the early days of Red Bull Powertrain's recruitment drive, Mercedes lost a whole lot of personnel involved in engine development to their arch rivals. But we're a couple of years down the track now, and with Mercedes' status as an engine supplier to such a significant chunk of the grid, if they aren't as on track as everyone seems to assume, then that could be catastrophic. Not only for their own championship hopes, but also their credibility with customer teams. Now, I'm not one to tout the whole "this driver deserves to win a world championship" thing. This is a team sport. There have been great drivers over the years who've never been in the right place at the right time. There's been some who've experienced the opposite and might not be considered by many as someone who's deserving of a title. But this isn't an individual sport. It's how everything comes together, from car development through to race execution, and a driver's contribution isn't just how they perform on track. George Russell, at this point in his career, I think is best placed out of everyone bar Max Verstappen to take a new generation of car that can fight at the front and take home the biggest trophy at the end of the year. So what were your takeaways from this year's Singapore Grand Prix? Are you surprised that none of those wall brushes resulted in anything catastrophic? Do you think Lewis Hamilton or possibly even Lando Norris should have been shown a black and orange flag? And who out of Mercedes, Ferrari and Red Bull do you think will take home second in the constructors this year? Chat about it down in the comments. Thanks once again to my patrons and to you for watching to the end, and I'll catch you next time.